What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we are joined by Jon Thomas today. We're going to talk all things tap cancer out, jiu-jitsu, like life. I'm very excited for this conversation. You're a perfect example of two things that really call to me, right? One is obviously philanthropic efforts to support families, to support organizations that are going through cancer, which is close to my heart. And the other is a sport that is very near and dear to me, which is jiu-jitsu. So welcome to the show, Jon. We really appreciate you being on here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, of course.
Awesome. Yeah, my goal, before the end of this episode is just for people to get more information about Tap Cancer Out, for them to understand, if they are a jiu-jitsu practitioner, how to get more involved, maybe learn a little bit more about obviously the organization and then jiu-jitsu in general. But before we get into any of that, when you first jump on the show, I'm looking behind your artwork and you have some like really legit art behind you. And You said you had Michael Jordan, Bo Jackson, and two others, right?
That's right. Muhammad Ali and Jay-Z. Yeah.
And Jay-Z.
Yes.
Okay. So it begs the question to me, why those four? Why did you choose those four?
It all started with Bo, of course. So I was a big Bo Jackson fan growing up. I had the poster, the famous ball player poster, where he's got the shoulder pads on. I mean, he's shirtless, of course, but shoulder pads and the bat. And I won it at a town fair, and it stayed in my room forever, probably until my parents sold it. And so I just happened to be so I used to work for an ad agency, and we were in a brainstorm, and a previous meeting had happened, and they had like a vision board up, and I saw the Bo Jackson artwork there. I don't know. Oh, I'm blocking it, but it was that. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, that is amazing. That's the poster that I used to have. So I did a reverse image search. I found the artist, reached out to him, asked if I could buy it, like a vector file, so I could put it on canvas. And then I noticed that he had all these other individuals that sort of exemplify greatness. And I'm a huge Jay-Z fan, obviously Jordan, Muhammad Ali. So I saw all those and I was like, this would be perfect. I'll get four. So I've had them in different offices of mine, even before Tap Cancer Out was a full-time thing. So, they've sort of followed me everywhere.
Random question, but kind of related. Do you collect sports card by chance?
A little bit.
Okay.
So obviously as a kid growing up, I had the folders and folders worth of baseball cards. They're not worth anything now, but so later, only a few years ago, I started just like buying cards and off eBay of like people I liked and people I thought might be good one day, signed rookie cards and things like that. It's just a little bit. It's not a ton.
It's fun. It's just that Bo Jackson card with that image is a pretty cool card. It's a cool card.
I bet. Yes. Yeah. Well, now I got to hunt it down.
Yeah, Jon, I was at an event maybe, 5 months ago, and Bo Jackson, Emmett Smith, and Andre Agassi were the speakers at it. And it was cool. It was a very cool event. But Bo shared a story about when he was in college, because I didn't know much about him. I knew he was a crazy athlete, two-sport athlete. Like I knew that he was incredible, but I didn't know much about his background. And he shared a story about how he was in college, and one day this guy, and I guess he came from a really very, very poor. If I'm not mistaken, he said he didn't have any running water, no sewer. Like he came from a really very poor environment. And some guy came up to him when he was in college and he offered him, if I'm not mistaken, $2 million to leave right there and go into like what was at the time, like an up and coming NFL type of thing. Yeah. I don't know exactly what it was. And it was right before the national championship with the team he was on. I can't remember what team it was. And he turned it down because he didn't want to let down his teammates. And he just shared this story about camaraderie, teamwork, and it just really hit home. So anyways.
He's the man.
All right, back to the topic at hand. Talk to me more about Tap Cancer Out. What is Tap Cancer Out? And why did you start? Like, where does cancer fall into your story? You know, I read a little bit about it, so I have an idea, but just for everybody who's listening, who isn't familiar, how did Tap Cancer Out get started?
So I've been touched by cancer just like everybody else. I mean, certainly not exactly the same, but we've all been touched by it one way or another. In most notably for me, in 2006, in March of 2006, my first nephew, Michael, was born. Just 3 months later, he was diagnosed with leukemia, a pretty aggressive form of leukemia, actually. And that December, he passed away. So he had a pretty difficult battle. He was in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins. And so we visited him a lot. We were in Connecticut at the time. My wife had actually just finished college in Baltimore at Loyola. So, that was obviously a difficult time for our whole family, to see everybody, to see his parents go through that, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Michael's sister, Allie, who was only, I believe, 3 at the time. That really shook us to the core. And what will forever stick with me was when, we went into the room to basically say our goodbyes. We all kind of knew that this was the last time that we were gonna be able to see him, because they were gonna take him off, support. And he did not resemble the little baby that we had been visiting the whole time. He was much bigger. He had a lot of fluids in him and all that stuff. So it was at that point where I was like, man, I didn't do anything. I was not helpful in this journey whatsoever. Like, my thoughts and prayers and visits, I'm sure they're appreciated, but I did not help. And that stuck with me for a while. I mean, obviously I wasn't just going to jump into med school and become a doctor or anything, but I was like, man, I'd love to do something where at least I feel like I was making a difference in helping people who are going through this in whatever way, shape, or form. But I didn't come up with the idea until 2010. So I hadn't even started training Jiu-Jitsu at that point. I started training Jiu-Jitsu in 2008, in the fall of 2008. And in 2010, I was actually at an awards show in San Diego, hosted by Classy. At the time, it was Stay Classy, and now they're just classy.org. But they are a fundraising platform specifically for nonprofits, and they have since been acquired by GoFundMe, still operate as their own organization. But they had this amazing event called the Classy Awards, which it was only in its second or third year at the time. It has since grown to be something much bigger. They have their own Classy Collaborative, but I just went as a guest. A friend of mine from high school, one of my close friends, Pat Walsh, he was a co-founder with his college friend, potentially roommate, not sure, Scott Chisholm. They're both engineers and had moved out to San Diego to be engineers, but they started Classy. And this event was amazing because it was all these people from all over the world who were running nonprofits and changing the world, and volunteers as well. Just like an incredible group of people to be surrounded by. And I was just a guy who worked at an advertising agency. Like, I was just the friend of somebody who was doing something good, So it was awkward, it was kind of like, it was cringy a little bit. Like when, at the cocktail hour, everyone's like, oh, I left my job in finance to start to build schools in Tanzania, and I activated military personnel to go into natural disaster sites. What do you do? I do strategy. I sell like fizzy water for Pepsi. It was not cool. It was not as cool as I thought it was, at least. So literally before I got out of the chair, I was like, I am going to think of an idea. The only thing I really had was I love jiu-jitsu and I hate cancer, and I want to do something through jiu-jitsu to support those who are battling cancer. That was it. I came up with the name. At the time, it was Tap Out Cancer. We eventually switched to Tap Cancer Out to not ruffle any feathers there at Tap Out. But, we had a logo. We created a logo, but I really didn't know what it was going to be. Like, what was going to motivate the jiu-jitsu community to get involved, to do something. And it took a few years of stops and starts. We went to an MMA show in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and set up a table with some of the shirts that we made, and we sold 2 shirts the whole night. Like, nobody really cared from that perspective. And that's when I was like, Jiu-Jitsu, I'm not an MMA guy. I don't fight MMA. I love Jiu-Jitsu. I want this brand to be specific to grapplers. And we have to figure out a way to get them involved. Additionally, my wife and I had run the Hartford Half Marathon with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society through their program called Team in Training. And we both signed on the dotted line to each fundraise $1,000, which we did, and then some. In return, they got our, entries to the race. They got us a hotel room the night before, a big team dinner the night before, a team tent, volunteers at every single mile marker cheering for you. We had our names on our shirts, so they knew who to yell for. And it was just it was so cool because we had this community of support and, some sort of rewards and perks for fundraising that definitely made the experience a little better. But the problem is we don't like running. My wife, especially, she was a Division I athlete, played volleyball, but running is not her thing. And so it was very cool that we were both able to do this and finish the race. But we never did it again because we don't like to run. And if you don't like to run, swim, bike, or play golf, it's really hard to be active and philanthropic, or to be philanthropic through the sport or activity that you like. So I was like, well, maybe I can apply this to jiu-jitsu. Maybe we can apply this perk structure to a jiu-jitsu tournament. And if we hosted our own tournament, it could be a thing. So in 2012, all I had was a school that was willing to give us their gym, and a date, and a couple people willing to help. That was it. We didn't have mats. I didn't have referees. I didn't know how we were going to do bracketing. I didn't know anything. And I was just a blue belt. I competed in a few tournaments, but it's not like I was working at all these other tournaments. I didn't know what I didn't know. Thank God. If I did know how hard it was to run tournaments, I probably wouldn't have done it.
They're very difficult. And
yeah.
There's a lot going on. Because that was back in 2012, you started the tournaments, but you guys have significantly grown from there, right? I mean, because what was your total for 2024? What was your total fundraised amount?
We provided our beneficiaries with $1.5 million.
Yeah, dude.
To 10 different beneficiaries. Yeah.
And how many tournaments did that take during the year to raise that?
20 live tournaments plus Global Grappling Day.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, dude, that's a lot of that's real money. I just wanted to go. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just want to go back before we go too far, on the emotion of not doing anything after your nephew, right? Nephew.
Yes, nephew.
Passed. Yeah. I mean, dude, that's real. That's real stuff. That's real heavy, especially as young as he was, right? Because at that point, he was what, less than a year old, right?
Yeah, it was 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's horrendous. It's terrible, and I wish that on nobody. But I'm wondering, was there? I mean, obviously, you went out and you did something, and I think that you felt this way at the event you're referring to. But I'm just trying to think about the takeaway for someone who's in a similar position where they feel like they can't do anything, but they don't have. I guess I'm just trying to dive a little bit deeper into your mindset of what made you decide to take that leap, and how other people can look for these signs to help them make these life-changing decisions. If there was anything else that occurred during that time that made you feel the desire to move forward, to completely shift gears, or was it just you just seeing this and just I don't know. I just that stuck with me. You felt a certain way, because I felt that way before too, and it's hard.
Yeah, it definitely had this overwhelming feeling at the time where I didn't really think about what was going to get in my way. Obviously, it's not the perfect time for me to have started a nonprofit. Certainly one in the jiu-jitsu space. I wasn't an established black belt. I wasn't a world champion. I didn't own my own gym. There were so many reasons not to do it. But for some reason, I was like naive to all of that. And I'm a very risk averse guy. I stay at jobs for a really long time. Like this was kind of out of the ordinary for me. But that feeling of like being fed up that I wasn't doing anything sort of masked all of the hurdles that stood before me to start it. And also, like when I say I started Tap Cancer Out, it was literally just that idea of jiu-jitsu, cancer, and I'm going to call it Tap Cancer Out. That was it. There was like no real business plan. Even if you look up, like when we started our 501c3, you have to like build a business plan, you have to build a budget, and that's all part of the application. Like it was comical what I thought it was or what I thought it was going to be, because it's so different now. I never thought we were going to host events, certainly not host tournaments. Like I didn't really know what it was going to be. I just knew I wanted to start. And when anyone asks like what my biggest piece of advice is, it's literally like, just start, because there's never going to be a good time to start. There's never. Like I could have easily said, well, I'm just a blue belt. Maybe when I'm a black belt, then people will take me seriously. I'll start it then. Or, you know, I've never hosted a tournament. Maybe I'll like start working for other tournaments and I'll learn and I'll figure out the best way to do it. Nope. I just did it. I mean, we were handwriting brackets. I was throwing my teammates out there to referee. Like they had no idea they were even going to do that. Like I can't believe it all came together in the way that it did. But yeah, there's never going to be a perfect time to start, especially if you want to create something like a charity or a nonprofit or a movement or anything. Like there's going to be so many reasons not to. You just need to take the next step, figure out what the next step is, and then the next step, and then the next step, and so on and so forth.
You know, something I'd like to ask both of you, since you've both had such a firsthand experience with cancer specifically, is I think that it's incredibly admirable that both of you have turned it and taken that energy and that experience into something positive, both with Ava's Kitchen and Tap Cancer Out. But I do suspect that for a lot of people out there, like I completely understand that powerless feeling. Like I can't imagine, but you know, I can assume just how out of your hands it feels, and the panic, anxiety, the just like wishing that you can like do more, whatever that is. How do you balance what maybe feels like being so hard on yourself with a lot of this, like I didn't do anything, there was nothing I can do, with what you guys did, which was turn that into fuel and fire for actually coming up with a thing that could make an impact, a monetary impact? I don't know. Like what's maybe the takeaway for some families out there that might be going through something similar, feel like everything is completely out of their hands, but also maybe having a little bit of grace that, hey, this stuff is outside of your control, and you know, the prayers and being there and being present is enough. But also there are these ways for you to actually take action and really make a difference.
Well, here, I'll say this, and then Jon, I'm curious your thought, but like what I would say is I think that one solution to feeling anxiety or whatever is action. So like, let's just say you're in business, you're going through tough things, or in life, you're going through something tough. Like action always seems to make things feel better. Like you feel like you're making forward progress towards an end state that's better. And, you know, when Ava got sick, I think that for us, we felt the way we felt was that we were blessed to have the network we had, the financial means we had, the fitness. We felt blessed compared to other families because we saw firsthand some really bad stuff. And we felt like it was our duty and to try and give, to try and support. But I think as a byproduct, it gave us something to focus on that wasn't like in the moment. And it made us feel like we were, I guess the action made us internally feel better that we were working towards something to help other people. And it kind of took our mind a little bit off of like what was actually occurring. And I don't know if that's the exact same thing for you, Jon, but like, I guess, and every situation is different. Everybody's going to react to certain situations differently. So I never judge anybody, especially with stuff like this. It's just for us, action felt like a solution to anxiety, if that makes sense.
Definitely. that it even applies to jiu-jitsu as well.
Oh yeah.
When you're like, obviously before every tournament, you're like super nervous and stuff, but like once you get out onto the mat and you're actually taking that action, you can't really think about the anxiety anymore because you've got a dude who's coming after you. So, I was always like anxious to just get the match started, so I didn't have to feel anxious anymore. It was like all the before stuff. But I'm never going to be able to save Michael. Like, I know that. My hope was that I could do something that when I look back on my life, that I felt like I had made some sort of difference. So I couldn't beat myself up in terms of, what could I have done differently? I couldn't have done anything differently because I hadn't started anything, but I could at least just start. I could figure out what makes sense for me, what is in my skill set, what am I passionate about, what is something that I'm going to want to continue to do month after month, year after year. And I knew that I was in jiu-jitsu for the long haul. I was never going to be a world champion or anything like that, but I enjoyed doing it and I went to class all the time. So that was something that I could stick with. So if I could figure out what sort of our way in, how we're going to mobilize the jiu-jitsu community, that maybe we would have sort of something sticky there that could last. But again, it took me like 2 full years to really figure out what the true business plan of Tap Cancer Out was and how we were going to move forward. We just spent 2 years trying to figure out all sorts of different ways, calling tournament organizations and stuff like that. Nobody really wanted to work with us in the ways that we had hoped. So we sort of had to take everything into our own hands. All right. If, this tournament organization or that tournament organization doesn't want to even donate a table for us to set up, well, let's just host our own tournament. And now we own the whole thing and we have a lot more flexibility. So yeah, it did make me feel a lot better when the first time I told my friend Pat, like, I have this idea. And he was all jacked up for it. And it made me feel like, all right, I had taken the first step. Now what's the next step? And then what's the next step? Action is huge, because it can invigorate you and guide you forward as opposed to continually looking back and trying to think of what you could have done differently.
I'm curious for the jiu-jitsu practitioner out there. I've competed in jiu-jitsu, I don't know, 7 times. One of the challenges with jiu-jitsu is that there's so many weight classes, so many weight belt rankings that at times, especially for local tournaments, it's very difficult to get a bracket going until you go to like the world level, right? Like then you could obviously have 50, 60 guys in your bracket. I'm curious what the recommendation is for someone who wants to get ready for their first jiu-jitsu tournament. You being an organizer of tournaments, seeing many of tournaments, what have you found as like a common thread for people's first tournament? When should they do it? What's the rule of thumb that I've heard of is compete at every belt level, which I think makes sense to me. But just what comes to mind when it comes to competition?
Yeah, there's a few things. First of all, like, definitely as a white belt, try to compete as much as you can. And then through all the belts, try to compete as much as you can. But my biggest mistake was having this massive imposter syndrome as a white belt and feeling like I shouldn't even sign up for a tournament until I feel like I'm good enough to do that. And I competed in one tournament and then I got my blue belt. And then I was like, what do you mean I got my blue belt? I thought it was a crappy white belt. Like, I didn't know I was this close to getting my blue belt. Like, we didn't do stripes or anything. It was just like a surprise belt. So I had no idea how I was progressing. And I thought I was not that good. And then I got my blue belt. And now I can't compete at white belt anymore. And now I'm at the bottom of the blue belt. And now I have imposter syndrome all over again. So, certainly you want to understand the rule set and things like you want to train enough to make sure that you can compete safely. But once you hit that point, try to compete everywhere that you can. I know. So when I started 2008 is certainly not like the old days, but there were not a ton of tournaments there outside of Naga and Grappler's Quest and IBJJF tournaments. Like I was driving 3 hours for like a $25 in-house jiu-jitsu tournament. Like I was going anywhere to compete because I loved and hated to compete. It was wildly anxiety ridden, but for me, but as soon as I was done, I was looking up the next tournament where I could compete again. So yeah, I wouldn't immediately jump into an IBJJF tournament. I think every tournament outside of IBJJF, all the local ones, especially with Tap Cancer Out, you want to get as much mat time as you can to start to shake off a little bit of not the cobwebs, but you want to, when you're competing on the mat, the view is different. Like in a jiu-jitsu school, the walls are so close to you, and then you step on a tournament mat and it's like this endless view. Like there's all these weird things that you don't think about, and that can be a little unsettling once you step onto the competition mat. Even just feeling the real pressure of someone who's really trying to beat you. That's hard to replicate in an academy where everyone's your friends and they don't really want to hurt you and they don't really want to like destroy you and beat you in 10 seconds. And so there's all these little things that help you get a little bit more comfortable with competing. Now, I was never not nervous competing up until my very last match. I don't compete anymore, but when I did, up until my very last match, I was still terrified before walking out there. So that's never necessarily going to go away. But the more you get used to like being on the mats and having a referee next to you and having all these people screaming that you can sort of hear, but you can't hear. And then your coach, you can kind of hear, but not really. Like all those things that you don't get in the gym. It'll help you from a competition standpoint, but I always subscribed to the idea of compete as much as you can. Like it's a shame that there are certain academies who, not every tournament is great. I understand that, but there are some academies that like swear off tournaments and say that you can't do that one or you can't do that one. Well, it's not like my kid's soccer where he has games and tournaments like every single weekend. Some cities don't have any tournaments come there. So it's hard to compete in jiu-jitsu and it's cost prohibitive as well. So I always tried to compete everywhere and anywhere that I can. I almost never had my coach there. I was usually the only one. But that's why I signed up for jiu-jitsu. I played volleyball all throughout college. And then after college, it was so hard to just like get all the guys together. You need 6 people from a certain position. Oh, we lost our setter. Can anyone find a setter? Like with jiu-jitsu, I just needed me. I could just sign on the dotted line and all I had to do was show up. I didn't need teammates. It was great when they were there. It was great when my coach was there, but I didn't have to have them. So I just went out there and competed everywhere that I could. Big tournaments, small tournaments, all over the place, just to try to get more comfortable with being out on the mats. So yeah, just compete as much as you can.
Jon, I'm curious, your experience when you were saying not knowing that you were going to be a blue belt and it could be surprising you. Would you say that that's the rule, the exception or the rule for most people? As an outsider, I'm just curious. Like, is it one of those things where you kind of know where you stack up and when that's coming, or it is just a little bit of a surprise for most people? Well,
most schools, they have the stripe system. Once you're on like your 4th stripe of your white belt, that the next promotion, which is probably coming, in the next few months or so, will be blue belt. We didn't do it that way. So yeah, I had no idea that it was coming, but there is no question that it's funny, white and blue belts make up the majority of our competitive pool. Those are the biggest divisions, for adults. The kids obviously have different belts, but also I hear most from the white belts who say, I would love to compete in Tap Cancer Out, but I don't feel like I'm ready. And then I'll say, well, how long have you been training? I've been training like over a year. Whoa. Trust me, you're ready. Like, you're ready. Listen, all these white belts, none of these white belts know what they're doing. Like all of them are all over the place and terrified. And like, you're white belts for a reason, you know? So get out there. Don't let that imposter syndrome make you feel like you shouldn't be competing, because you're competing in a white belt division. Everybody's a white belt. So, get out there. You know, obviously, our tournaments can only address a certain portion of the jiu-jitsu community because not everybody competes. So on the one hand, you know, I'm trying to encourage people to compete, but it is not for everybody. So I'm sure we'll talk about it, but that's where Global Grappling Day came from as well, to engage the folks that don't compete. But for the folks that do want to compete but are unsure how to take the first step or when, yeah, hopefully Tap Cancer Out has provided a good opportunity, you know, if we're in their city or close by it, that they have a tournament where they know it's going to be pretty well attended. We run on time, so there's not the anxiety of like warming up, cooling down, warming up, cooling down. My mat changes 3 times. I'm running all over the place. There's not that chaos. You know, we're pretty efficient in how we run things, to make sure that anxiety is down, stress is down a little bit. You know, people want to win their medals, but it's not the end all be all to what we do. Even if you get tapped out in 10 seconds, you can still walk out with a backpack full of swag and a trophy that you're the top fundraiser. And so, it's a different vibe at our tournaments for sure. So hopefully they're a great place for folks to either make it their first tournament or the only tournament that they do in a year, which we do hear from people of all belts. They're like, I don't compete. I just compete at Tap Cancer Out, which is cool to hear.
Man, you guys are going to be right here in my neck of the woods in San Antonio.
Oh, and that tournament's popping off. Let me tell, like, you know, with every tournament that, you know, there's peaks and valleys, and, you know, sometimes it's not as good as the previous year. Some tournaments, like our Boston tournament, has just gone up every single year, but they're not all like that. San Antonio was our first year last year. We weren't sure what we were going to get. You never know. And it was one of our best first year tournaments ever, until it actually set the record until Long Island crushed it. Long Island is wild. But San Antonio is now outpacing almost all of our spring tournaments. So we're really excited. Texas has been a great state for Tap Cancer Out, just in general.
Dude, Texas is like the mecca right now of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, Gabe lives in Seguin, which is, you know, outside of Austin a little bit. And like, I'm telling you, Austin's just the absolute, you know, mecca right now for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
There's a lot in California too, but I wanted to ask, you know, you're right about the competition. You know, I've competed a lot in a lot of things. And I think that, for me, you know, feeling a certain way makes me feel like I just care, right? Like if you're a little bit nervous or anxious, it just means you care, like you want to perform well. And I think that feeling is actually really natural. And I think it's actually really a positive, because you're not just going in there nonchalant, like you care, you want to be competitive. You want to perform to your expectation, in whatever you're doing. Right. And that kind of goes into work too. Like I want to win. I want to be the best at whatever I'm doing. I wanted to ask about, connection. You know, I think that jiu-jitsu and CrossFit, actually, I think CrossFit's done a really good job of this too. I think CrossFit Jiu-Jitsu in particular, it creates a strong, like probably more so in Jiu-Jitsu actually, like a brotherhood and a, you know, cause I'd say based on my experience, like 90% of the people in the gym are guys. You know, I'm sure that maybe in your competition is a little bit different, but at least the gyms that I go to, 80% at least are male versus 20% female. So it starts to create these relationships and these bonds. And I'm curious, like, if that's what's really opened it up for you coming out of college playing volleyball. First off, dude, collegiate volleyball, like I've watched some of the guys play. You guys are crazy. Like just wild. Yeah. Like, did you do the beach one or did you do indoor?
I'm just like a McGee guy. I'm just an indoor volleyball guy. So dude, I don't really like no-gi, and I don't really like playing volleyball in the sand either.
Dude, the indoor is absolutely wild. Yeah. But anyways, I'm curious the role that jiu-jitsu plays and what you've seen in terms of creating connection, fostering growth for men in particular. Because I know for me, a lot of friendship groups have been created through jiu-jitsu, and I'm sure that's probably been the same thing for you. And I bet you probably get groups together to go do one of your fundraising tournaments.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things, obviously Tap Cancer Out provides benefits in a lot of different ways. And, it could just be a great place to compete. It can be a place for you to fundraise and make an impact and feel like you're making a difference through the sport that you love. But it also gives our competitors in the advertising world is what we call the authority to publish. But, we don't talk about our cancer stories all that much. Maybe if we're asked, but there's a lot of, the ways that we've been affected by cancer. It's just not what comes up, after a tough round of jiu-jitsu when you're, laying against the mats, where I feel like some of the best conversations are after the rounds are over, our gis are spilled all over the mats, and we're just like laying there, putting off cleaning the mats. And you just talk and talk and talk. And sometimes you talk longer than you even trained. But people aren't talking about cancer, talking about how they've been affected by it. When I started Tap Cancer Out, I had already been, training a few years, but one of my teammates came up to me and he said, this is really cool what you're doing. I'm actually a cancer survivor, and like pulled up his shirt and had a scar and everything. And I had been training with him for over 2 years and I had no idea, because why would he bring it up? Why would we talk about that? So it is great to see, at least through the lens of Tap Cancer Out, especially with men who don't like to open up about this stuff and the ways that they've been affected, to see them open up and tell the stories of how they've been affected by cancer and why they want to make a difference in the world, and why they are fundraising for their, Tap Cancer Out BJJ Open in their area or for Global Grappling Day. We, in our first San Diego tournament, we had a young man who had just lost his wife to breast cancer, and he won gold in his division, and he broke down. He just fell to the ground, started crying. His whole family ran onto the mats and jumped on top of him, and they were just hugging and crying. And he brought the medal to her gravesite, and but as we have all experienced as being men in this world, we tend to keep those emotional things inside. Hopefully, we're all doing a lot better at getting them out. Hopefully we're all in therapy and talking about these things, but it's hard. And especially when it comes to cancer, because it can be just a downer if you're bringing it up. So, it's great to see, obviously, men, women, children, talking about their cancer story, and more importantly, why they want to make a difference and why they want to make a difference through jiu-jitsu, and why it's meaningful to them to do it through jiu-jitsu, because it's really hard in general to do it through the things that you're passionate about. So, just seeing people sort of open up about this stuff is really cool.
Yeah. I'm going to find out which one is near me, because I got to do the Master Worlds coming up here. So I think a good place to kind of go for jiu-jitsu practitioners who aren't interested in competing, but they want to get involved with your global grappling day, and or school instructors or whatever. Mm-hmm. What's Global Grappling Day, and then how do you determine? Because I had talked to your team a little bit about maybe one day having some of the funds go to NIGU, which is the organization that we fund through, which is called the Never Ever Give Up organization, Jesse Reese. We fundraise all of our money through our annual event for there. But how do you pick the charities you donate to, and what is Global Grappling Day? That's a mouthful.
My daughter calls it Global Clappering Day, and it's just stuck forever. It is a mouthful for sure. So I'll start with that, and then we'll talk about the beneficiaries for sure, because they're amazing. So Global Grappling Day, literally an idea that came to me when I was riding the Peloton sometime in 2020, when we were all holed up in our homes and all of our tournaments were canceled for the year. And I was like, man, what are we going to do? How are, people were reaching out and saying I still want to support Tap Cancer Out, but since there's not going to be any tournaments, what can I do? And I didn't really have an answer for them. Meanwhile, I was seeing other organizations who would typically have walks or runs. They were just saying, instead of all of us getting together for the 5K, just run the 5K around your neighborhood. And so it's like a virtual 5K. You can still do all the fundraising and then just run around your neighborhood. So, I needed to figure out what is our virtual 5K for jiu-jitsu, which is really difficult because you can't do jiu-jitsu that well without another person or a group of people. But we're obviously in the middle of 2020, we're trying to stay safe. So we came up with the idea for Global Grappling Day, which at the time it was one day with one partner, you were going to roll for 1 hour straight. So my black belt test, I had to roll for an hour straight with a new black or brown belt every 2 minutes. I got one water break at 30 minutes, and that was it. And I was gassed about 6 minutes in. I was gassed. So then I had to go 54 minutes of just heart, and because all of these guys and girls were trying to kill me because it's my black belt. So that's when they get to do it. But I did it. I survived somehow. And so it's kind of like similar to a 5K and a marathon. Anyone can get up and like finish a 5K, whether they run it or walk it, like they can make it through. You might die running a marathon or doing a triathlon, certainly, or something like that. So like, what's something that's difficult, but not impossible? And we've seen like roll-a-thons where people are fundraising and they roll for 24 hours straight and they come out of it with broken ribs. And like, I didn't want to do that. So an hour-long round, a 60-minute round, you can do that. It'll be hard, but you can do that. And so we launched it in 2020, and we had the date in December. And it was really cool to see, like right at midnight, we had a pair of folks in Singapore, I believe. They started their hour-long round and they were live streaming it on Instagram. And throughout the whole day, we were watching all these different people. It was just like our Instagram was lit up with all these people streaming their hour-long round with their partner, and they had fundraise leading up to it. And we used the same structure as we did with our tournaments. So outside of, you can fundraise and earn free entry to our tournament. That wasn't relevant to Global Grappling Day, but all the other perks they could earn. And you don't have to have the butterflies of competing. You don't have to cut weight. You don't have to drive somewhere and park and like all that stuff. So it sort of took all the hurdles that competing can sort of throw at you away. And we raised, I believe, $275,000 at that first Global Grappling Day. So we knew we had something. And so after that, we've had it every year, but it's sort of transformed as obviously academies opened up again and came together. They wanted to turn it into more academy specific events. And pretty much everybody has an open mat on Saturdays. So they just needed to sort of rebrand their open mats as a Global Grappling Day event. And there's so many different ways that academies are doing it. It's really cool. We still have a lot of people who do the hour-long round, but other academies, they'll bring in somebody for a seminar, or maybe it's just an open mat with food trucks and raffles. And we send every academy that's hosting an event a big 6-foot banner where everybody can sign it. And it says, "These grapplers changed the world today." So everybody who shows up signs it. And it's all the positives of jiu-jitsu without some of the pitfalls of competing. Right. And so it's just like a day of like good vibes. And, like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those didn't exist, but they exist now. And when you say those words, everybody knows what that day means. Someday, I hope when we say Global Grappling Day to any jiu-jitsu practitioner, they know exactly when that's going to be and exactly what it's for. It was, there is a day of giving, a global day of giving. But we needed to make something that was sort of jiu-jitsu specific and also was borderless. So we have academies from all over the world taking part, because again, our tournaments are geographic specific. If you don't live in the United States, you can't come to a tournament. It's hard unless you're flying in from another country. But so how do we get across the borders? Exactly. Yes. December 13th. It's somewhere. It's usually the second or third week. We keep trying to avoid no-gi worlds, but they keep switching their date right on to ours every single time. So nevertheless, yeah, it's perfect. It's totally free to sign up, of course. So you can sign up, register. Now we have different perks for Global Grappling Day than we do for the tournaments. So whether you do the tournaments or not, you have this opportunity to earn a lot of different perks, and we have academy perks. If they raise over $5,000, they get this big branded cooler and a bunch of other stuff. So, and we have dedicated staff member here, Sarah, who works with any academy who's hosting a Global Grappling Day event. She's like the guru of how to do these. She hosts a badass Global Grappling Day event at her own academy. Check Matt Charlotte. So, yeah, it's a really great event, and it's how we can reach those competitors who may not be close to a tournament or may not want to compete.
And then for this year, how many organizations are you guys fundraising for?
So we have 11 beneficiary organizations now. It all started with one. It started with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and unironically, it was really hard for us to find a beneficiary that was going to be willing to work with an organization that claimed that they were a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu nonprofit. They immediately thought UFC. They immediately thought, fights in a cage. And I couldn't get I won't name any organizations, but I couldn't get anybody to return my emails or calls. They were just not interested. And the Connecticut chapter of the Leukemia Lymphoma Society was literally just a few buildings down from where I was working at the time. So I reached out to them, and they were stoked to work with us. They were like, absolutely. Yeah, nobody ever reaches out to a local chapter. So yeah. So I was like, hey, I literally want to give you $10,000 or $20,000. Will you take it? And they're like, yes. So that we had the first one. Yeah. And at our first tournament, I thought we were going to fundraise maybe $5,000 or $10,000, but we ended up fundraising $20,000. And that's when I knew we had something. And so it all started from there. And we had a one beneficiary model for the next 6 years. Every 2 years we would switch. So we work with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. We work with St. Baldrick's. We work with Alex's Lemonade Stand. But by the time we gave our final one beneficiary gift, we gave almost $900,000 to Alex's Lemonade Stand. And at that point, it was a lot of money. It's a lot of money to just give to one organization. Not that Alex's didn't know how to deploy it. They absolutely did. But now I wanted to include a lot of different beneficiaries because so many different types of cancer are affect so many different types of people. So different organizations are going to have more meaning than others. So we wanted to make sure we had a pediatric cancer beneficiary. So we still work with Alex's, of course. But other organizations that, are for volunteerism and survivorship and experiences, First Ascents and Camp Sunshine, and, to try to address the entire cancer journey or more of the cancer journey. We can never address the entire cancer journey, but, different varieties of cancers, research, survivorship, all sorts of things. So now we have 11. We just added Memorial Sloan Kettering earlier this year in New York. So that was really cool as well. So we're always adding beneficiaries, and as our gifts, continue to grow and participation gets bigger and bigger, we have more funds available to distribute to different beneficiaries. So right now they all receive about the same, maybe $50,000 between the biggest and the smallest gifts, but they're all for specific programs that are outlined by each of the beneficiaries.
Love it. Yeah. Well, I'll reach out to you about Nigu and about what we're doing with Ava's Kitchen. But yeah, I like what you guys are doing. Look, again, cancer sucks. There's no other way to say it. It impacts a lot of people in a variety of different ways. But I think putting something like a jiu-jitsu tournament for people that don't want to do 5Ks or 10Ks or whatever, and then having them be able to fundraise around, I think is awesome. So maybe we'll get Gabe out to the one in San Antonio. There's nothing in California that I see, but the Global Grappling Day, December 13th, I think,
that's going to change though. We're hard at work at figuring out our West Coast, strategy, because we need to hit the West Coast where we're in, Phoenix and San Diego. But we're going to get up that coast. I promise. All right. We'll see you there. But we got 3 tournaments in Texas. So we got Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. So take your pick.
All right. Maybe we're going to Gabe sooner or later, we're getting him on the team. Maybe we'll see. He's been doing other stuff. But dude, Jon, I really appreciate it, man. I think that, the work you're doing is really impactful, obviously. I think coming from a parent of someone who's gone through leukemia, support like this, it matters, right? And It's the little things. The organization we fundraise for example, sends out these joy jars that are just like putting smiles on kids' faces. It's little stuff like that. These organizations all do different things, and they all do them really well. And the work you're doing, it's meaningful, and like it's crappy. It's really sad why you got started in it, right? Obviously, but it's I guess cool to see what you've been able to make into something really special. I'm sure you've impacted tens of thousands of lives, if not more. So congratulations, Jon. And we're going to stay tuned on everything that Tap Cancer Out is doing. For people who are listening who want to get more information about Tap Cancer Out, we're like, all right, I'm down for Global Grappling Day. I'm ready. Yes. I'm going to find a training partner. Where should they go? What's the best place?
Just go to tapcancerout.org. All of our tournaments are linked there. So you just pick the one that's most relevant to you, and it'll send you to that sort of campaign page. Also, if you don't like to compete, or if you don't do jiu-jitsu, but you still want to get involved, volunteers are massively necessary. Our tournaments are basically all volunteer run. We only have 4 full-time employees here. We have a head referee and a bracketing manager and things like that, but we'll only really bring about 4 or 5 people to run the tournament. So outside of that, it's all volunteers who are working the rings and podium and things like that. So we can never have enough volunteers. So that's a great way to help if you're local to a tournament but don't necessarily want to compete, or if you want to compete for free, that's a way to do it. But otherwise, find a local Tap Cancer Out BJJ Open near you, or if there's not one near you, Global Grappling Day is going to be amazing this year. And we've got some cool things in store for later this year that we'll be announcing shortly.
Dude, awesome. Thank you, Jon. That was awesome.
I love the volunteer angle. I think that's great, especially for people who aren't practitioners but want to be exposed to like what the competition is like, or feel like they're supporting. So awesome idea, Jon. Congratulations for the success and all the fundraising you've done. And man, we'll stay in touch, and I'm looking forward to competing in one of your events when they come to the West Coast, and or getting after it on Global Grappling Day. But on that note, we appreciate you guys for checking out the podcast. If you are a jiu-jitsu practitioner, share this with your school, share with the owner, and make sure they're aware of what Tap Cancer Out is. Appreciate all you guys, and keep training hard.